Winter came early that year. The wind tore through the pines like a pack of wolves chasing ghosts. And snow fell in thick, silent curtains, burying the trail until the world looked like it had never been touched by man. The trees groaned with ice. A raven flew past and vanished into white. Inside a one-room timber cabin tucked against the edge of the Bitterroot Mountains, a man sat at the table, sharpening a hunting knife by firelight. His face was worn like the leather boots by the door, creased, quiet, watchful. The fire crackled softly, casting orange glows across the floor. His name was Wade Thatcher, though no one had spoken it in years. Not out loud. He paused, just for a second, when the wind shifted. The blade in his hand stilled. His eyes, deep set and rimmed with red from too many sleepless nights, flicked toward the window. Frost lined the glass, snow still falling. Nothing moved out there. Still something was coming. He could feel it like a storm behind his ribs. Wade hadn't spoken to another soul in 5 winters. He hadn't needed to. He'd fought in the war between the states, lost a brother, then come home, and buried his wife Clara and their boy Jacob to a fever that swept through the valley like a scythe. After that, he quit the world, sold his wedding ring for seed and whiskey, built this cabin with his own hands. Now a grave sat just outside the window, 2 wooden crosses side by side. He read to them sometimes, old letters, Bible verses, never his own words. He'd grown thin but strong, ate what he'd trapped. Planted potatoes in spring, dug root cellars for the cold. There was a rifle by the door, always loaded. He'd hear things, sometimes gunshots in his sleep, voices in the wind, but he didn't mind them anymore. They were part of him now. Was halfway through scraping a new notch on the antler handle of his knife when he heard it. A knock, clean, solid, twice. Wade froze. The wind paused like it too was listening. He reached for the rifle and rose slow. Every muscle tensed, breath caught. No one came out here by accident. Not this deep, not in this weather. He stepped to the window, nothing but white. Then, a flicker of movement. 2 figures blurred, half swallowed by snow, stood near the cabin stoop. A woman, upright but shaking, one hand on the shoulder of a smaller shape beside her. A girl, maybe 14, leaning into the woman's coat like she might fall. Both covered in ash, faces gray with cold. The girl dropped to one knee, coughing. Hard, blood dotted the snow. The woman looked up. Their eyes met through the frost-streaked glass. Wade's hand hovered over the latch. No one came here. No one was supposed to, not since the fever took his world. But something in that girl's broken coughed away. The woman stood tall despite. Her bones trembling beneath her coat cut through the fog in his chest like an axe through pine. Wimped the door. Wind shoved in first, then silence. The woman said nothing, neither did Wade. They just looked at each other, to people too far gone for small talk. The girl slumped against the doorframe. Wade stepped back just enough. Inside, he muttered, it wasn't kindness, it wasn't mercy, it was something quieter. She nodded, then pulled the girl in, boots thudding against the wood. Wade shut the door behind them, locked it. Outside, the storm swallowed their tracks. Ask ChatGPT. The cabin held its breath. The woman laid the girl gently down near the hearth, pulling a blanket around her trembling frame. Lucy, she said the name once, barely above a whisper. The girl's skin was too pale, her lips cracked. In wet rattles that worried Wade more than he let on, he handed over a tin of boiled pine bark and rubbed whiskey on a rag to press against her chest. That was all he had. The woman didn't ask for more. He asked no questions. She offered no stories. That suited him fine. But something in her posture, straight-backed, despite her exhaustion, reminded him of Clara in the hardest winter they'd ever seen. When the crops failed and wolves howled too close at night, Clara never dropped her eyes. Neither did this woman. He gave them one night, no more. They slept near the fire, huddled close. Wade sat across the room with his rifle upright against his shoulder, boots still on, eyes half closed but never fully gone. It had been too long since he'd heard breathing besides his own. Now there were 2 others in his space, too unfamiliar. rhythms filling the silence. The next morning, Lucy couldn't stand. She tried, knees buckling beneath her. Wade grunted and turned away, but his hands already reached for the kettle, already set out another bowl. "She needs rest," the woman said. "One more night," he answered. He didn't ask her name, didn't want to know it. Names had weight. Still, the woman swept the floor with a broken broom, patching the silence. When she saw the graves outside through the window, her jaw set differently. "Thatcher," she murmured once, reading the wooden marker. "Clara Jacob?" She didn't press, but her eyes stayed on the window a long time. Later that day, she tried to help him chop wood, reached for the axe like it belonged to her hands. He stepped between her and the chopping stump and shook his head. "I said no," he muttered. "I'm not helpless," she said quietly. "Didn't say you were." We split the log with a single clean strike. She walked away without another word. The girl Lucy talked more when she had breath. Too, she liked to draw. Sketched in a worn notebook, fingers shaking with fever. Wade caught glimpses, the cabin, the grave, his face, a church burning in the distance. He never asked. She never explained. By the second night, the woman cooked stew from dried beans he'd been saving. She left the pot simmering while he sat on the porch with the snow hissing around him. No one asked permission. That night, after the fire had dimmed and the room slipped into shadow, Wade heard movement. Not footsteps, something sharper. A cry that wasn't meant to be heard. He entered the room quietly, rifle left by the door this time. The woman twisted in her sleep, her breath coming in gasps, a blade glinting in her hand. She woke with a start, eyes wild. The knife clattered to the floor. He didn't move. "We weren't just running from weather," she said into the dark voice hollow. "There are worse things out there." He stood for a while longer, said nothing. In the morning, she began to patch his torn coat where the shoulder seam had. Afraid? He didn't stop her. Didn't thank her either. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something else had started to shift. Not trust. Not yet. But the kind of silence that didn't cut so sharply anymore, asked ChatGPT. The next morning, Wade was out by the ridge, glassing the horizon with his scope. When he saw the first rider, far off, small against the white hills, just a black speck on a pale horizon. They didn't ride toward the cabin. Not yet. Just circled wide, slow, calculated. One pointed. The other spat. Wade watched until they turned and vanished behind the tree line. His breath fogged the scope, and when he pulled away, his knuckles were white around the rifle. He went back to the cabin without a word. Inside, Ruth was feeding Lucy sips of boiled spruce bark. Wade didn't speak, but something in the set of his shoulders told her. "They found us," she said quietly. Wade didn't ask how she knew. He could see it in her face, the fear too deep to be new. Her hand shook when she tucked Lucy's blanket tighter. That night, she finally told him. Her husband had tried to settle on free land in Dakota Territory, same as many others after the war. Okay? Built a house out of nothing. Planted dreams in dry dirt. But the land barons came in with silver veins in their blood and fire in their hands. They wanted the whole valley. Her husband wouldn't sell, so they burned the barn, then the fields. Ruth was inside the house when they came the second time. She ran with Lucy. Her husband didn't. They said he'd buried a deed somewhere, a silver claim. I never believed it. But then they came after my brother. Her voice broke. They killed him, tore apart our wagon like dogs. I didn't know. Until after ... the deed was in the heel of one of his boots. That's what they want. She looked at Wade then, daring him to turn away. But he didn't. He just stared at the fire for a long time before rising to grab his coat. "This isn't your fight," she added. He paused by the door. "No, it ain't." But later that afternoon, he sat by the fire with Lucy, showing her how to tie a rabbit snare. Her small fingers trembled, but she listened closely, eyes bright despite the fever. He'd cleaned her wound earlier, bandaged a cut she got while trying to help split kindling. She didn't thank him, but she didn't stop smiling either. Ruth stood in the doorway, watching him tend her daughter, the way his hands were firm but gentle, the way he looked at Lucy like he hadn't looked at anyone in years. Her eyes filled. She blinked fast and turned away. "You're not as empty as you think," she whispered to him later. When he passed her in the hallway, he didn't respond. But when she came to her bedroll that night, an extra blanket was folded neatly at the foot. The wind had picked up again, hard and sharp. Clouds rolled in, heavy with more snow. The storm was coming by midnight. The girl was asleep. The fire was low. And Wade stood by the window, watching movement between the trees. He couldn't see shapes, only shadows. But the silence had shifted. The air had weight. He turned to Ruth. She was already awake, clutching the knife she kept near her coat. "We're not alone," she said. "No," Wade answered. "We're not." She waited for him to say more, to give a plan. "I've got traps in the woods," he said. Buried under the snow, Ruth's grip on the knife tightened. Wade looked her in the eyes. "Let's finish this." They came before dawn. Snow had blanketed the forest in silence, but Wade felt them before he saw them. Flicker of movement near the barn, the faint crunch of boots in crusted frost. Then the first torch arced through the air. Flames caught fast. On the old dry boards, orange light flared against the white landscape. Wade was already in the loft, his rifle steady against the crossbeam. When the first man stepped forward, silhouetted by fire, Wade squeezed the trigger. The echo cracked. Across the trees like thunder, the man dropped. Another came from the left. Wade tracked him, waited until the wind slowed, then fired again. Precision, cold, controlled, downstairs. Ruth braced herself at the side door with a shotgun she barely knew how to use. 8. She didn't flinch when the glass shattered above her. Just adjusted her stance and waited. Lucy had already crawled into the cellar, clutching her sketchbook and the hidden deed wrapped in cloth. Her breath came fast and shallow, but she didn't cry. One of the bandits kicked down the back entrance, roaring, shotgun raised. Wade didn't make it in time. The man slammed into the room like a storm, knocking Ruth against the wall. Wade met him halfway, no bullets left. The fight was brutal and close, crashing into furniture, fists landing with dull, meaty thuds. The knife came out too fast to stop. It sliced across Wade's shoulder, then pressed hard to his throat. Then Ruth, pale and shaking, drove her knife into the man's back. The bandit's eyes widened. His grip slipped. Blood pooled fast. Smoke was curling in from the barn, seeping through every crack. Wade staggered to his feet, arm bleeding, chest heaving. Ruth dropped the knife. Her hands trembled. He caught her before she fell. By sunrise, the fire had eaten half the barn. The snow kept it from spreading to the cabin, but the air was thick. With ash and grief, they buried the bodies far off deep in the woods where no one would find them. No markers, just distance. Later, Wade stood near the 2 graves out front and hammered a 3rd cross into the frozen earth. He didn't carve a date, just a name. Samuel Martin. Ruth came up behind him. I didn't speak. "Thank you," she whispered. He touched the cross gently. Not forgotten. Spring came slowly, dripping in one pine needle at a time. The snow pulled back. The river began to run again. Lucy's strength returned, and so did the color in her cheeks. She drew again, mostly trees, mountains, and one sketch of Wade sitting on the porch. When the day came, Ruth packed what little they had into a worn satchel. Lucy wore boots Wade had stitched for her. The sky was pale blue. Birds were back. They stood at the edge of the trail, trees parting behind them like old friends saying goodbye, you know, Ruth said softly. "You don't have to stay here." Wade looked at the cabin, at the graves, then at her. "I know," he said. She smiled, small but real, then turned with Lucy and walked down the trail. Wade didn't follow, just stood beneath the tall pine tree, watching until they became part of the forest. Lucy turned once and waved. He lifted his hand. Just once, the wind picked up again. But it no longer howled. Narrator voice, over. "Sometimes we build walls so high, we forget there are doors." Sometimes it takes a stranger to remind you there's still life left inside you. This story moved you? Like and subscribe to hear more tales of grit, grief, and quiet redemption from the frontier. What would you have done in Wade's place? Let us know in the comments.